Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future. I'm Zach Gardner, the chief architect at Keyhole Software. And a few months ago, I decided that I just simply did not know enough about generative AI. Sure, I'd used ChatGPT. Sure, I had used Midjourney and Dolly and all the other services. But what I really felt like I was lacking was a broad perspective from people from many different backgrounds, many different fields of expertise, people from inside development, but also people that are outside or tangential or in completely different industries than I normally get to talk to. So I did what any chief architect does. I scoured the four corners of the WWW. I got referrals from a number of different people. And one of the referrals is awesome enough to agree to come on and talk with us today. Today on the program, we have Debbie Reynolds, who's the founder, CEO, Chief Data Privacy Officer of Debbie Reynolds Consulting LLC. Debbie, how's it going?
Great. I'm excited to be here. And I love the fact that you started this exploration as so many people are as curious as you are about this field.
hmm Absolutely. And, just my disclaimer, which I'm going to get engraved on my tombstone because I've said it so many times. All the views and opinions expressed in this program, the views and opinions of the participants do not reflect their employers, any trade organizations they're affiliated with, any loyalty programs that they have for grocery stores near them. We're just two people. We're just talking, we're just getting to know each other, talking about a very important topic. So to get us started off with, Debbie, for the people that, aren't familiar with you, kind of what's your background? How does one even get into data privacy in this day and age?
Those are two really good questions. So first of all, I am a data person. I started my data life in library science. So maybe Zach, you're too young to remember when libraries had card catalogs, but I was turning those into databases back in the day. And so I've been involved in digital transformation in many different types of industries. And as I've done those types of projects more because I'm a technologist, I was working with multinational companies that had to do data moves or data transformation where there were laws where certain data couldn't be used in certain ways and things like that. And so over the years, actually, I had a personal interest in privacy. So I read a book in 1995 called The Right to Privacy, and Caroline Kennedy was a co-author of that book, and it was about privacy rights in the US. And I was shocked. It was a book that my mother had. She had given it to me. I read it, and it really caught my interest because I think in the US, we feel like we have so many freedoms, right? So we have, freedom of speech, freedom of different things, and privacy is not in the Constitution. And so I saw those gaps and I saw them as they were developing over the years as we went into the more commercialized internet that we know today. And so a number of years ago, probably 10 years ago, a lot of companies that knew me from this other work started calling me up and like, hey, can you talk to us about privacy? Like, we know that there's something brewing in the EU with what they're changing with their laws. And they, one of the biggest companies that the first called me was McDonald's Corporation. So I went and talked with their corporate legal department about the general data protection regulation. And that was before it came out. I'm like, hey, this is big, it's a big deal. It's going to impact all the world, not just the EU. And I talked about that. So at that point, I decided, since so many people call me about privacy, so well, why don't I just do privacy? So yeah, I started my own consulting business. A couple of years after that, PBS called me up and asked me to talk about this new law called GDPR that nobody knew about and what the implications of it will be. And it's pretty funny. So that was like in May of 2018. And so a lot of the predictions that I made, actually all of the predictions I made came true. So it's pretty funny. People still call me about that interview, but that's how I got into privacy.
Awesome. And don't let my boyish good looks deceive you. A good moisturizer is all it takes. And I do recall the Dewey Decimal System 100%. I have a 9-year old and a 6-year old. And so we've had to kind of teach them like how to locate books, using it. So it's always fun to kind of like remember the things that happened when we were kids. So
Oh, true.
The GDPR, also very interesting topic, as well as the EU AI Act. Another exciting one in this field. If you could talk a little bit, kind of dovetailing into that, how are you using generative AI in both your personal as well as professional life? Kind of what's your go-to tools and how are you using it? Maybe what are some areas where you're staying away from it?
That's a good question. Well, first of all, I'm a lover of technology. I don't love everything people try to do with technology. I think that's a big difference. I always like to kick the tires on technology to see if it's something that I can use. What are the limits? Like, what can it do? And I really like, especially like ChatGPT, the LLM text models, because they can do. To me, I think of them as like a low level assistant, right? They can do like uh low risk, maybe tedious things that you don't want to do, that it helps you with. I do, so I have a media company as well. And so I love it to, for example, let's say if I do a video, I'll upload the transcript and I'll say, summarize this video. Or yeah, as you as a content creator, I know you'll appreciate this, which would really irritate me. And it was very time consuming. So let's say you want to do a post and you want to do hashtags. Like I would sit there trying to think, oh well, what should the hashtags be? Like I can load it into like ChatGPT and say, hey, give me some hashtags, and it's a great starting point. I can edit it, and it does save time. So like that 5 or 10 minutes that you save, especially when you're, a smaller business and you're trying to make the best of your time, those are really great things. So I use it for summarization. It's very good for, let's say if you want to send an email to someone and there are like a lot of things that you want to say in the email. It's great to, just write out all those things and say, hey, can you like organize it or improve this email? And it'll kind of structure it a better way. I really like it for that. It's very good for passive aggressive emails. So let's say you want to send someone like a really like a mad email. So you write it out the way that you want it, and then you tell it, hey, improve this email. And so very, very passive aggressive, almost to the point where people are like, oh, did that person just insult me? Like, so it can politely insult people in emails or things like that. So I always use it for that. Because I used to use like IBM many years ago, they had like a tone, um, like a AI that they use to for you to adjust the tone of an email. So I used to use that a lot. So when you send an email, they're oh, you sound too angry. I'm like, okay, well, let me change it or whatever. So with things like ChatGPT, a lot of times if I say, well, here's what I want to say in the email, I'll write the email, and then they write the email as if you're, addressing the Queen of England or something. So I'm like, well, just, I like I know the person, or I say I actually use it and I tell it, you're me, you're Debbie. So you know the person. So obviously if you know the person, the tone shouldn't be as formal, but then you don't want to act like you're on the beach, like surfing or something, like, hey dude, whatever. So, I use it for stuff like that. So I love it for any type of content creation, tweak things is really great for like a spell checker. So when
Mhm.
you spell, it will like do brute force spell check on like anything that you put in there, which I really like. So it's like it's pretty cool. So I love it for stuff like that. I don't love it when people say, "Well, let's let LLMs cure cancer," or "the world's going to end in 2 years." So I'm like, that's not good. Like that's not a good use. These things should be tools. They're not human. They're not sentient. There should not be used to replace humans. They're just helpers, right? So I think if you use them in helpful ways, the benefit that you will get is that you'll spend less time on those lower level tasks, right? So when I'm talking with companies about privacy, I'm like, just like you wouldn't put your personal information, you wouldn't put your social security number on the internet. So don't put it in an LLM system, right? You wouldn't put your health information on the internet. So don't put in those types of systems because what AI is doing is it's taking that information and it's scrambling it in ways that makes it hard to track. And that's what all these regulations are about. So do you know what data you have about an individual? What are you doing with that data? How are you using it? Are you retaining it too long? Do you still have a purpose for it? And those questions get harder to answer when you're putting it into a system and you don't understand what it's doing and how it's working. So for me, I talk to many companies, maybe teeny companies you've never heard of, Zach, like PayPal, Coca-Cola, Uber, about these things. And I always tell them, hey, play with it, play around with it, see what it can do. Start with those low risk, low, the things that people do that are very tedious and repetitive is very good at stuff like that, right? I use it a lot to do schedule for podcasts that I produce and stuff like that. That's very tedious work that you would have had to do yourself. So look at it for those things so they can save you time so that you have time to do other things. Don't think that it's going to be an easy button and it's going to take over, your thinking work, because it's not a brain, right? It is a source of information. It's not a source of truth. And so you as a human have to bring the truth. You have to know what the truth is when you're using these tools.
Mm-hmm. Oh man, so many good things to unpack in there. One of the things that you said kind of early on was being able to summarize, large documents. One of I'd never heard of the use case for passive aggressive emails. That's a new one for me. So congratulations. I'm
It's the
50
best.
episodes in. First time I heard that one.
If you don't use it for anything else, I would get it. It's worth
Yeah.
it.
The summarization part, that's interesting. Like I've heard some companies where they have, just like massive amounts of policies that are internal policies, and it can be really difficult to be able to navigate them, to know if I am a doctor, what gifts am I allowed to receive, if any, from a patient? Is there like a monetary cap on it? Being able to go and do a search, a traditional search on those documents can be kind of complicated. You're never quite sure what to type in, you're never quite sure the results. But being able to have retrieval augmented generation go through those documents, parse them out, and then not only tell you what it thinks the policies are, but also links you to those policies so you can check it yourself. Time saving, exactly what you said. Summarization, one of the earliest examples that I can think of where I heard someone got in trouble for it was actually Samsung. It was maybe about this time last year, I don't want to say a bunch, some of their employees uploaded into the cloud version of ChatGPT proprietary and confidential information for Samsung, and then asked it to do some summarization on it and really didn't think anything of it until, like what you were saying, these large language models get retrained off of the inputs and the outputs. So what someone puts into them can then be used to be able to train, and then people were able to exfiltrate Samsung's data that they had, put out there. So they blocked it at a firewall level. No one was able to use it. I'm curious if you could talk about, GDPR considerations or anything else related to like, what are some of the areas that companies like could and should be worried about when it comes to this proliferation of this technology for their own proprietary and confidential information?
Yeah. I do not recommend that companies put their proprietary confidential information into, especially these public models, because that information gets scrambled like eggs. Like you can't really take it out once it's in there, right? And then what a lot of these makers and these public models do, once it's in there, what they're trying to do is they try to suppress certain things, right? So it will say, for example, maybe in the LLM, there's information about how to create a bomb, right? But they said, well, we don't want people to do that, so we're gonna like we're gonna write some code and try to suppress that information. But someone who's super smart and knows how to prompt, they can fool the LLM and actually get that information out. So if it's in there, someone can get it out. So don't assume that just because you type something or put something in there, especially if it's something that is confidential in nature, personally identifiable, don't assume that that information can't be gotten out of there. And then also from a accuracy perspective, what large language models, what people don't understand about large language models is that They're made to give answers. So it will give you an answer whether it's right or not. It's just not going to not give you the answer. Think about Google. So if you search something on Google, even if they don't have any information on it, they're not going to ever just not give you something, right? They're just going to throw as many results as they can at you. And so LLM is like that too. But I also tell people, an absence of information is also information in an LLM system. So that's where some of those biases come in. For example, and this was not a generative AI system. This is a different AI system made for hiring. So I think Amazon was using at some point a hiring algorithm, and what it found is that it kept giving men more priority in the system, and they couldn't figure out why.
Hmm.
And part of that was because they were maybe feeding more male candidates in, or maybe they did those first. And so when you have these large language models and has all these parameters, it's doing things in the background that you may not be not thinking about, right? So maybe the LLM is saying, well, maybe men are better at this job because you seem to be giving us more male candidates. So we're going to suppress women and we're going to put more men in jobs, right? And so you as a organization will be in trouble, not the person that made the tool, right?
Mhm.
So they're like, okay, you're breaking the law, or you're doing something that's discriminatory based on your use of these tools. So it's very important to be able to have that transparency, making sure that people know how to use the tool, that they aren't doing things that could harm people. And that's another reason why I say, companies, when they want to play around with this, start with those lower risk things, those lower risk use cases where you're not going to harm anybody. A regulator is not going to care. If you want to summarize a document, like, go for it. No one's going to be mad at you that you did that, right? But when you're talking about things that could possibly harm someone's life or liberty or their privacy, or run afoul of these laws, you have to be careful about the data that you put in there, and then sort of how you use it. So I tell people, when you're using these models, it's the company's profit, it's their profit and your risk.
Hmm.
So you have to figure out what is your tolerance for risk. And maybe, like you said, like Samsung, they're like, well, let's just block this at the firewall level, because we can't stop people. We can't train people good enough to know not to put stuff in here that they shouldn't be in here.
Or their profit, your risk. That is a really interesting take on like Facebook's model, where essentially the user is the product. That's really interesting. I mean, you mentioned biases and running afoul of legal issues. Some of the interesting things that I was reading, not necessarily generative AI related, but last night, as of when we're recording this, Congress just passed what's been called like the TikTok bill, where TikTok is going to have to be divested from ByteDance within 12 months, or else it's going to be banned in the United States. And one of the data points that they included on there was a bias against certain kinds of information being shown on TikTok, things related to Tiananmen Square or Taiwan. And it's really interesting that there's, we talk so much about like automation, about the power of computing. There still has to be human decisions made, both in terms of what data gets into the training and validation sets, like you said with the Amazon example, as well as the output controls on the sentiments from these inferences. Google went in one direction with Gemini, to where they made it, just some very interesting decisions on that front. And then I think of other cases like Twitter, to where they have a heuristic to guess, is this person a Democrat? Is this person a Republican? And I will show them things corresponding to what's going to keep them on the platform the longest, which neither of those examples are necessarily like illegal, or they might be, slightly unethical, but it's all about the human that is in there, both in terms of our biases that we bring to training sets and our biases in terms of output. I'm not sure. Have you come across, and just out of curiosity, like, have you come across anything related to like the EU AI Act, or anything as in terms of like what liability a company might have in terms of like some of the decisions they make? Is there any potential there for litigation, or is it still kind of up in the air?
Yeah. So the AI Act is um, almost final. Pretty much the text is final. It has a couple more hurdles before it gets final. So when it gets final, it'll have a final date where the law goes into effect, and then I think enforcement happens within 2 years of that. So that's basically the way EU law works. But for the AI Act, what they're really looking for, and this is what we're seeing around jurisdictions around the world, they're very interested in companies that are using artificial intelligence in ways that could possibly create some type of human harm. So those are those high risk scenarios that I'm talking about. Again, regulators don't care about these low risk uses that you have. So go for it, do that. But if you think you're going to cure cancer and maybe certain patients and not others get treatment because no one looked at the algorithm, those are things that what these regulations are trying to draw against. In the federal government in the US, they are appointing an AI chief for every agency within the US government, and they've basically been told that if you create an AI or use AI or try to use one that could possibly harm someone, then you can't use it. And so, for in terms of like penalties, the AI Act will be the stiffest penalty in the world. I think the penalty for that, if someone runs afoul of the AI Act in an egregious fashion, they have to pay 7% of their annual revenue worldwide. So it's a pretty big bite there. I think it should have companies really thinking about what they're doing, because if you're doing things that are harming people, you're gonna, be in big trouble. And so what the EU has done, and maybe their best export is regulation at this point. They are able to create these, huge bits of legislation that we aren't able to do here in the U.S. and other jurisdictions. But what they're doing, just as we saw with the GDPR when it went into full effect in 2018, it has been very influential in laws that have come since then. So even though no other jurisdiction has adopted all of what the GDPR has done, they've taken enough bits and pieces of it where you can see the fingerprints of that legislation all over the world. And so I think the AI Act will have a similar impact on AI in terms of like law and regulation around the world.
Hmm. Hard to keep up with this stuff. I mean, I go to presentation on this stuff every week. So no, this is really good, Debbie. If people want to learn more about you learn more about your work, where should they go? Where should you recommend? Any final thoughts that you have on generative AI too?
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting frontier. It's so funny because I don't know about you, like I kind of roll my eyes when I hear the prognostications from people. So it's like, oh, the world's gonna end in 2 years. That was an actual article I saw like a couple weeks ago. Or, oh, it's gonna cure cancer. It's like, no, no, it's not gonna do either of those things, right? But, I think what people don't understand or realize about like generative AI or the way we're using AI now is that artificial intelligence will have a horizontal impact on almost any type of industry, right? Almost like the internet. I wouldn't liken it to the internet. It is definitely a great invention, but almost any type of job will have some layer of AI. So that means that we have to learn more about artificial intelligence. We need to understand what it can do and what it can't do. I'm not. I used to always say I'm not concerned about the evil robot, but I am concerned about a person that thinks that a robot can do what a human can do. And so that creates like a huge risk for humans, I think. And for me, I would say, especially generative AI, I don't think of it as like the smartphone or fire, as I've heard people say. It is a washing machine. Right. So it's something that can do the tasks that you don't really want to do. It would be very time consuming for you to do so that you can spend time to do other things. So I think once people get that more practical idea around how artificial intelligence can help them, and we can have people stop trying to, you know, think that AI is going to take over human human knowledge or something, I think we'll be in a better place. So if people want to contact me, they can look me up on LinkedIn. Just type in Data Diva, Debbie Reynolds, and I'll pop right up. Or you can look at my website, DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. I have a lot of videos and newsletters and publication stuff that people can check out.
All great content. Thank you very much, Debbie, for coming on the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This is great. Thank you.
Likewise. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll catch you in the future.